Well, 2025 is just about here, and as always, there are questions about laws coming into effect. A little bit more optimistic this year than it's been in years past, but we still want to answer those questions. Let's talk about it. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel today. That's right, we're gonna be looking into 2025. I thought it would be a good idea just to make sure everybody was aware of the laws that were coming into effect January 1st and after, as a lot of legislation, not that was just signed a couple of months ago, but even legislation prior will be coming into effect in the year 2025. With us today in studio, which is a pleasure to talk us through it, is an attorney at Michelle & Associates. That's Matt Cubeiro. Matt, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you again for having me.
Absolutely. And guys, if you like content like this, you look forward to getting this kind of information so that you can be in compliance, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to these videos. It's a great way for you to directly be involved in the Second Amendment fight here, as we have a lot of litigation and legislative efforts that are going to be going on throughout 2025. So Matt, let's just dive right on into this here. We did a lot of great work on legislation in 2024. A couple that slipped through the cracks, though, were these laws on lock boxes or storage boxes. That of course was Assembly Bill 3064 and Senate Bill 53. Can you give us a rundown of these and how they're going to be implemented going forward?
Yeah, so Senate Bill 53 was the bill that basically makes it so we have in California right now where if you want to keep a firearm in your own home, you have to keep it in a manner that prevents unreasonable access by people that are prohibited from gaining control of it, and that can include things like a child or someone that you know is a prohibited person. But that the state law doesn't really dictate that, for example, you have to keep your gun in a lockbox unloaded or something like that. There are, of course, some jurisdictions like San Francisco, Los Angeles, and other cities that generally have anti-gun tendencies to impose mandatory lock storage ordinances, regardless of whether or not you live with someone that's prohibited or not. And so what this bill will do is it will basically expand those local ordinances to now be the statewide law, where you have to keep a gun in your own home in a lockbox of some type. But there is a caveat. There's a carve-out, I should say, for when the gun's sort of in your immediate possession or control. And so, at the very least, this is one of the things that CRPA did a great job of with its lobbyists at the Capitol to try and water down some of the more egregious restrictions that were going to try to be imposed as a result of Senate Bill 53 when it was first proposed at the legislature. And so this will allow, for example, CCW holders. It will allow you to still keep a gun, on your nightstand, so to speak, or in a manner where you can have immediate access to it, as long as you're sort of in the physical realm of the firearm and it's under your control, kind of thing. So, and that was in large part thanks to CRPA's efforts on that front.
And then and by the way, guys, there are a lot of laws that are going to be coming into effect. And Jacob, we have a list of something that you can kind of base your actions off of moving into 2025 that actually Matt put together. So Matt, Thank you very much for that. But Jacob, Go ahead and include that in the description below. Obviously, we're not going to be able to cover all of them here. I want to hit some of these big ones, obviously, but that list will kind of have an all-encompassing view of what you can look for in 2025. So as far as the implementation is concerned, what's that look like for these lockbox laws?
Yeah, so the implementation for the mandatory statewide storage requirements is going to kick in on 2026. So it's not taking effect right away, but it will take effect the following year. So basically a year from January.
Got it.
There's also the other one I know you mentioned, and I wanted to touch on it briefly, was 3064, and that one it pairs with Senate Bill 53 in that it deals with the devices that you can use to store your firearms. And when this bill was first proposed, we currently have, like, if you were to go buy a long gun at a dealer, you can sign a long gun safe affidavit to show to the dealer that you already have a safe at home as a means of a firearm safety device that you can sort of testify to, basically, and not have to buy one with the gun. And so that's why we have that. And so the requirements under California law as it stands right now are that the safes in California have to meet standards that are outlined in the penal code. But what this bill would have done in its original form is that it would have mandated that all safes, all lock boxes, any sort of safety device would have to be first pre-approved by the California Department of Justice. And not only that, the manufacturers would have to submit those devices for testing and have to pay to have those devices listed on the roster. And so you can imagine if that bill took effect in its original form, all of a sudden you'd have people with, $5,000-$10,000 gun safes in the state of California that are no longer legally valid to be used. And versus, these, cheap locks that you get with handguns kind of thing that are supposed to be able to lock the action are the only thing that people would be able to rely upon.
Yeah, I remember talking about that when we were advocating against this legislation. It basically creates a roster for safes and lock boxes akin to the handgun roster that we have. So that not being the original, not being what ends up being implemented in 2025, what is it that we look forward to in 2025?
Yeah. So again, thanks in large part to the lobbying efforts of the CRPA, we were able to convince the legislatures that was just a bad idea for multiple reasons, not the least of which is that you're effectively outlawing arguably the best method of storage available. And so thankfully, because of those efforts, the bill was significantly watered down. And so as it stands now, we're keeping the general standards for safes. So safes will not have to be pre-approved by the DOJ or go through that testing. So as long as your safes will meet those standards, which for the most part, every reasonably manufactured gun safe, that's not, just something, cheap from overseas kind of thing, should be able to satisfy. And that will make it, at least it will hold back some of this, ridiculous legislation that they were trying to impose on Californians, and thankfully it will be able to still use our gun safes, basically.
Right. I mean, you kind of look at the way that markets go. Technology plays a factor, right? Especially with firearms. I know one of the main arguments that ends up getting put forward is, you have this thing in something called the Unsafe Handgun Act. As technology improves, generally speaking, these things get safer and safer to use and handle.
That's right.
And what you end up doing is throttling the production or importation of those things as they get safer and safer and safer, doing the exact opposite of what you claim to do with legislation like that. I don't know, lockboxes could be the same thing. I don't know about necessarily being more safe to use, but technology increases in these things. It makes it more user-friendly. So glad to see that that's not going to be throttled the same way.
Yeah, and you make a good point to show that technology is ever advancing. And so just to give some more examples of this, it's like I'm now dealing with the California Department of Justice trying to impose its penal code restrictions on dealers that have installed these very modern, very up-to-date security doors for their facilities. But because they don't have a doorknob on them, the DOJ is saying that your $5,000 ultra high-tech security door is not approved.
Wow. Yeah.
Under the law. It's there's some ridiculous things. And another good example is we saw the Attorney General of Illinois recently sue Glock because they're saying that you can easily convert these Glocks to full auto machine guns with these switches that you can get. Well, the problem is that in California we're stuck with Gen 3 Glocks because of the roster, and the newer models of Glocks have alleviated that issue, but we can't get those in California. So we're stuck with the ones that they're going after Glock for.
Yeah, it ends up being real contradictory, especially to the messaging that they put out. Well, I guess, you have Senate Bill 53, which is going to be taking effect in 2026. That was passed in 2024. Likewise, there was legislation passed in 2023 that's going to be taking effect in 2025. I know that this one kind of already has taken effect as far as the implementation of the law is concerned, but I thought that we could maybe go over Assembly Bill 28 and the 11% tax.
Sure.
We do have a lawsuit on this, that we filed. We're going to be continuing to pursue in 2025, but I think it's important that we at least express what we're expecting to happen for the consumers. So what do you foresee happening in 2025 as far as the consumers are concerned for firearms and firearms products?
Sure. Well, I mean, the bill technically took effect in July of this year. And so for the most part, if you've purchased a gun since then, you've been affected by this legislation. There was some questions initially when it first came into effect, how things were going to get applied and how, for example, it would be applied to customers by dealers. But effectively, the dealers in this case are required to collect the tax, the 11% tax, which is what this bill is. And they then have to transmit the fees that they collect to the California Department, the CDTFA here in the state of California. And so it's taken some time to work out, but what you'll see now on a receipt is like you'll typically see your sales tax on the receipt. But in addition to that, you'll see a second line item for the 11% tax for anything that's subject to that. And that includes firearms, ammunition, and firearm precursor parts in the state of California.
Yeah, so this one is really tough, and it's punishing everybody.
Right.
It's punishing the consumer by forcing the consumer to pay more. It's punishing the FFLs themselves because generally speaking, it could act as a deterrent for people to buy stuff. So then they see revenue fall, and then at the end of it, the money goes into the hands of people who don't like the Second Amendment movement in the first place. So
That's right.
this one kind of punishes everybody. Obviously, we're looking to strike that one down in court, but I think overall, the message here is just to understand that 11% tax is still being implemented. It will be passed to the consumer, and you'll have to be paying that whenever you go to buy firearms or firearms products. Likewise, in 2023, another big one that we've talked about a lot, but not necessarily in this sense, is Senate Bill 2. Another one that we have a lawsuit on, but really only part of it, right? Because part of Senate Bill 2 was implementing the sensitive places, but another part of Senate Bill 2 was the CCW requirements. Are any of those kicking in 2025, and what's the implementation of those going to look like?
Yeah, so Senate Bill 2 has basically taken over the CCW issuance regime in California now. And so if you've applied this year or going into next year, you will be subject to the requirements of Senate Bill 2. And so you're correct that we have a lawsuit that's challenging part of Senate Bill 2 as applied to where you can or cannot carry. And thankfully, at least as it stands, that injunction that we were able to obtain is still in effect pending appeal. But, it's wait and see what the Ninth Circuit will do with that kind of thing. That being said, though, there are other lawsuits like CRPA v. LASD and a few others that are challenging, I guess you can say, the effects of Senate Bill 2, but not specifically Senate Bill 2, things that have basically resulted from its implementation. And so things like high fees for applications, in addition to significant wait times for people that apply, that are just, in some cases, like when we first filed the lawsuit in LASD, it's like 18 months to be able to obtain a CCW. For a CCW that's valid for 24 months.
Right. So I guess, again, another effect of legislation that's already been implemented. There are some places that are really good in California. In fact, there are a lot of places that are really good in California. There are even some places that weren't good prior that since Bruin have really come around and started issuing. I know that we've talked about San Francisco a lot. And the issuance of CCWs that they've had their huge increase up there. But there are still places like LA where we're seeing the side effects of some of this bad legislation where they are in open defiance of Bruin. We're continuing to see the long wait times. And like you said, we have lawsuits on those. But until those lawsuits get an injunction and action is taken, judgment is given, that is something that in those specific areas, we're still going to be seeing the side effects of in 2025. Something that we don't really address a whole lot on this channel that I kind of want to start doing more. We've gotten plenty of feedback from our viewers through the comment section is the regulatory issues. We talk about the legislation, we talk about the effects that legislation has, and then we talk about the lawsuit, which is our claim against that legislation. But there are other means that the government has to negatively affect gun owners in California, and that's with the regulatory issues. Any big pending regulatory issues that you see either coming into effect or sincerely affecting gun owners in 2025?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. And you're absolutely right that I think oftentimes it's the regulations themselves that lead to the egregious, examples of implementing things that negatively impact people's Second Amendment rights in the state of California. And the most obvious example that I can think of off the top of my head is the recent proposal by the California Department of Justice to raise the purchase fees for ammunition background checks from $1 to $5. And looking at the proposal when they first brought it back, when they first introduced it a couple months ago now, they've basically admitted that the whole background check process is significantly underwater as far as its financial issues are concerned. And they're losing money on the system, partly because they overestimated how many people would actually be utilizing the system, but also because of the gross expenditures that it costs to implement the system itself. And so without them being able to raise the fee, their system is going broke. And so they're now basically forced to do that. And so that's an example of where you are now going to be subject in California if you want to buy a simple, box of 22 ammo that cost you probably $3 or $4. You're now having to spend more just to be able to purchase the ammo in the first place.
Yeah, I feel like it kind of goes in tandem with the way that our current government is kind of operating over the last decade or so. Let's go ahead and take a bunch of money from this group of people,
Yep.
and for a huge project that we don't know how to manage, and then later have to admit that it's underwater. So, hi there, we're going to take more money from you. That's an unfortunate one. As far as the regulatory issues, we have dealt with a couple. Pertaining to CCW specifically with Senate Bill 2
Yep.
over the last year. Is that process going to be the same? What's the way that we can combat that as far as process with the government is concerned?
So thankfully, there is still some semblance of democracy and public participation in our government in California, at least even if it's only sometimes at a face value, but it's still important nonetheless. And so when anytime the California Department of Justice wants to adopt or amend regulations, they're subject to a public comment period. Now, depending on what method they use, if they use the standard method or if they use the emergency process, oftentimes you'll still be able to participate, but sometimes the window that you have to participate is significantly less. And so at least with this time with the ammunition regulations, they went with the more formal process. And so we've now submitted those those comments on that proposal, and DOJ will be forced to respond to those comments before they implement a final regulatory package. On the CCW side, which you mentioned, one of the real, I should say, the biggest part of the implementation of the CCW regulations were the regulations as applied to who can be an instructor for the required CCW training. And as part of Senate Bill 2, what the Department of Justice did is they adopted regulations that at first sort of severely limited who could be an instructor, and basically making it so you either had to be a post-certified law enforcement instructor or a BSIS certified security guard instructor in order to be able to teach the required course for CCWs. And naturally, a lot of instructors in the state of California didn't have that credential. And so there was a lot of pushback, not only from the public, but from the sheriffs themselves, the issuing authorities, because all of a sudden they don't have anybody that can teach the required course for their applicants. And so DOJ, thankfully, they walked that back a little bit, and they've now allowed the regulations to include NRA certified instructors, whether through their personal protection outside the home course. If you're certified in that, you could be a certified instructor for the CCW program. But what we're waiting for and what I'm anticipating is DOJ will be adopting a formal regulatory package along those lines. And what we hope to have is also have the CRPA instructor program listed among those entities that could be authorized to have the required credential to become a CCW instructor in the state of California.
Well, that is a program that has been growing and a lot of positive feedback from that CRPA curriculum, which, of course, is California-specific curriculum, which,
exactly.
Which kind of sets it apart from a lot of other curriculum that it currently exists in the state. So I guess, I wanted to hit some of the big ones here. There are, of course, a lot of other laws coming into effect in January and in July 2025. Again, guys, check out the link that Jacob posted in the description below for the full list. I know that there were several that were coming into effect that had to do with restraining orders. I know that there were several that had to do with firearms seizures, pertaining to issues in the home and stuff like that. But I guess overall, looking into 2025 as a kind of a final outlook here, what's the outlook you have moving into next year with these laws that are coming into effect?
I'm actually probably more hopeful than I have been in a number of years, largely in part because of the results of the election. And seeing that, I think there's going to be significant changes at the federal level, first and foremost, both at the U.S. Department of Justice and the ATF, obviously, but also the Supreme Court, being able to maintain a pro 2A, or at least, a court that appreciates and recognizes the Second Amendment for what it should be. Yeah. And, being able to do that will have drastic impacts, not just at the federal level, but into the future here in California as well.
Well, right on, Matt. I know you're a busy guy. It's always great to see you in studio. I really want to thank you for taking the time with us here today and sharing this wisdom with us. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And guys, if you like content like this and you want to see more going into 2025, please, once again, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to these videos. It really helps with the algorithm and pushing this information out there so that as many people as possible can be as informed as possible. And as always, it's a great way for you to directly contribute to Second Amendment litigation and legislative efforts here in the state. Thanks again, guys. We'll see you on the next one.